Firstly, the question asked earlier on whether or not RTE intends to establish a register of external interest or a register of participation in external events. RTE is hopefully about to undergo a process of forensic and deep reform, and Tim Davie, when he was appointed to the BBC, which was going through similar, maybe not as difficult a challenge, said that trust in impartiality is not a nice to have, it's the very essence of who we are. The bedrock of why people come to the BBC, and equally it's the bedrock of why people repeatedly come to RTE over and over again, to be able to trust what they're hearing and seeing is impartially delivered. And Mr. Lynch, in response, you said that RTE would consider this. I think it's absolutely essential that RTE goes way beyond considering this, and RTE commits to putting such a register in place, because it is not appropriate that individuals who have extraordinary power to shape public opinion, much more so than anybody sitting around this table, have side deals going on, perfectly legitimate from a legal perspective, but from an impartiality perspective, they are not acceptable. And if such deals are ongoing and people are being paid handsome amounts of money above and beyond what they're being paid for through their salary, the public needs to be aware of that in order to trust. So I'd ask that question again, will RTE establish such a register?
Yeah, I think that firstly just to say it is not a case that the staff in RTE can just enter into commercial agreements at all. Anything would have to be approved to begin with. The register seems like a perfectly good idea, but I think in terms of the incoming DG, and having spoken to him this week, that his plan is, in terms of corporate governance, that there would be deep reform. So we know in this incident, in this actual event, corporate governance has failed completely, but I think it is not systemic within the organisation in terms of actually sitting the exec board. It is not systemic. I would say that in terms of the controls that are in place, and that are run. It's just a point I have to make, that there are controls in place. In this particular incident, they were overridden,
Mr. Collins, when an auditor is doing an audit, they would contact perhaps the CFO or a department head if they came across a particular matter that they somehow confused them or mystified them, in an attempt, one would think, to resolve it before it was escalated to anybody higher. Did Deloitte, prior to March the 17th, when the audit chair was elected, did them before that contact you or anybody in your department or any department head in an effort to find out what exactly was going on with these payments before it was escalated to the head of audit?
Yes, they did. And they asked me for an explanation of these invoices. I spoke to the Director General, I got an explanation from her, and I relayed that back to Deloitte. Deloitte weren't happy with that explanation. Deloitte then spoke directly with the Director General. I understand they weren't happy with the explanation she provided them with then, and at that stage they referred the matter up to the ARC.
Do you think, and I'll ask this of all the people that are appearing before us today, that the public find it exceptionally difficult, if not impossible, to believe that an arrangement could have been put in place with Ryan Tubridy, a highly unusual arrangement, one that went above and beyond normal corporate practices within RTE, and that only one person in the whole organisation was aware of it, only one person dictated that it would occur. Despite that same person, who, as Deputy Griffin pointed out, can't appear before us now, despite that same person having sought, as she's pointed out in her own statement, substantial and ongoing advice from the legal team within RTE, from the financial management team within RTE, do you accept that the public find it exceptionally difficult to accept the element of your statement last night, that ultimately the responsibility for this and the knowledge around this particular arrangement rests with one individual and only one individual?
Yeah, I think we need to break it down and go Ryan Tubridy's actual contract is obviously a lawful contract. His substantial, what's called a 5-year contract. The tripartite agreement would be a lawful commercial arrangement, and is. Yeah, whatever you think about it,
that.
it is, right? Where this entire story changed was the decision to underwrite that agreement, because the consequence of that meant that the figures that were published were inaccurate. And just to be completely clear about it from my own perspective, I did not know anything about these payments, how they were made. I did not know that they would impact the top 10 earnings, yeah? So I had very little knowledge, just to be completely clear about it, yeah? Yeah.
Mr. Collins, your explanation, such as it is for the €120,000 extra for Ryan Tubridy, is that it's a loyalty bonus. That was the phrase that was used. Were you involved in devising this bonus? Do you know, during the process of putting it in place, was Ryan Tubridy actually aware that this was ongoing? Those two questions.
Yeah, no, that bonus was put in place when his 2015 to 2020 contract was agreed, so that would have been back in 2015 before my time, so I had no involvement.
Okay. Mr. Lynch, you mentioned earlier on in the response to Senator Cassell's that you were not aware of how the Tubridy pay deal was, and the phrase you used was operationalised. What do you mean by that?
What I mean, in terms of from a commercial perspective, how it was operationalised. So I would have had no knowledge of the fact that it was paid from the barter account. I would have had no knowledge that it was cost neutral. So that is, again, I would say in terms of corporate governance and an integrated exec working in a functional way, an issue.
Okay.
Yeah.
Ms. Nirali, why did you not think it appropriate to inform the public when you had an opportunity on TV last week that you had sought the resignation of D. Forbes?
So to clarify, I sought her resignation. It wasn't forthcoming, and then we went into a disciplinary process. And the legal advice around that, I was advised that we couldn't say she was suspended because of labour laws. However, we took the decision that we would take that on board and make it public that she was suspended, because the damage that was being done to the organisation outweighed whatever the risk was of saying that publicly. That was what happened.
Thank you. Anne O'Leary, if I recall correctly, in one of your responses to Senator Warfield, you said, and correct me if I'm wrong here, that you had concerns about the contracts that had been undertaken with Noel Kelly's clients, and you're looking to do a further investigation. Did I mishear you? Or?
No, you're correct on that.
What are those concerns?
I was uncomfortable with the idea that something would be put down as consultancy, and that with no definition of what that was. It didn't seem like an ordinary transaction to me. So I suggested to the ARC committee that perhaps at the next meeting we would put that on the agenda and see if an internal audit could be done. And then if it turns up that that's perfectly okay, then we can let the matter lie. If it throws up further concerns, then I would get, again, either Grant Thornton and Arthur Cox to come in and take a look at it.
Okay. And maybe perhaps for Mr. Lynch, the tripartite agreement, as it has now been described, wasn't signed by anyone at all, as far as I can gather from looking at the Grant Thornton audit report, until after the first payment was made. It was only signed by NKM in April of 2023, after Grant Thornton were called in, and as far as I can determine, it was never signed by anyone at all in RTE. Is that the case, and if so, why?
Yeah, so I think that in terms of that, so my expectation was, when I went through the paperwork, that the tripartite agreement would refer to 75,000 within it. So in fact, it didn't, because while, as I understand it, well, actually it doesn't relate to the guarantee. I think in terms of the sequencing of events, in 2020, obviously we had COVID, and the events didn't happen until 2022. So everything was getting pushed around, and this agreement then was between the commercial partner, NKN Management, and RT.
The main reason for the agreement was that the commercial partner, because everything took some time, and then we had COVID was a major factor, wanted to make sure it was in writing what was agreed and what the events were going to be. So that was done in conjunction with the client.
Two final questions and I'll finish then. Just going back to Mr. Collins, just to be clear, when I spoke earlier on about Deloitte, initial concerns around the arrangement, when exactly did they come to you to express their concerns? Can you recall what that date was, approximately?
Approximately early March.
Early March, okay. And finally, just going back to Anne O'Leary, could you just expand a little, when you say you have ongoing concerns about the NKM arrangements and the contracts that are negotiated, what are they exactly and how do you intend to?
Perhaps my concerns are that I haven't had a good look at them, and I don't feel satisfied that I understand exactly what's gone on there. So maybe it's just to satisfy myself first.
So you have no concerns about the actual, well, I suppose you haven't sufficient knowledge of them yet to be able to determine.
I have concerns that I don't understand it properly, and my best route to solving that is to get an internal audit done. Then I'll be able to have a look to see if I've got more serious concerns, and then I can get an external person to come in to take a look.